This episode was brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for business. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome to Unstoppable today, Roy Cook, author of The Fool's Errands, Why Your Goals Are Falling Short and What You Can Do About It. Roy, as I said in the prelim here, I don't normally do too much research on my guests because I want to get to know them at the same time as the audience and be just as curious as everyone else who is listening. But I have to say, I kind of broke my own rule here and I did a little bit of research, as I just mentioned to you. And I have to say, I'm really interested and intrigued to where this can go. But the question that I like to ask a lot of guests, and I think this will be an interesting one from you, is let's say you're at a dinner party and there's 8 people around a table. Nobody knows who you are. Everyone sits down, the conversation ensues, and at some point everybody goes quiet and the focus goes to you and the person beside you goes, "So Roy, what do you do?" How do you answer that question?
Well, right now I would say it's easy. I don't do anything. I've been retired for 20 years. But if you caught me before I was retired, I would say I was an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur for 11 years. And before that, I had an ordinary business career. I worked at Procter & Gamble, a couple of other marketing companies. But then because of an ethical dilemma where a company wanted me to do something that was unethical, I quit and formed my own company. Because a friend of mine said, "Roy, I like to make my own mistakes. That's why I'm an entrepreneur." And I thought, that's terrific. And so I built a company up, and after 11 years, I had enough financially to retire. And so for the past 20, I've done whatever the hell I want, because if you're financially independent, I define that as you can do whatever you want regardless of time or money. So I probably wouldn't say I'm financially independent at a cocktail party. They would say, "Well, aren't you special?" So that's what I was. So I had a career working for big companies like Procter & Gamble and Metro Media for maybe, let's see, how long was that? Almost 30 years.
And that was in the area of marketing, was it?
Yeah. It was packaged goods marketing. And what that means is anything that's sold, well, here you'd say at a Safeway or a Kroger.
So like an
anything in a
FMCG.
pack. Yeah. So that's something in a package, like
Gotcha.
foods, health and beauty aids, cleansers. Or I worked for companies that helped those people introduce their products, helped Pepsi. When I got my own company, I would help them introduce products. I worked with Pepsi, Frito-Lay, Armour Dial, Procter & Gamble, Kraft, all kinds of people like that. And being an entrepreneur was 100 times better than just having a job with these other firms, because, well, there's lots of reasons for that. I mean, you're your own boss. You're having fun. You're having a challenge. You want to be unstoppable, as you said. You may be stoppable going this direction, but maybe you're unstoppable going that direction. But better yet is when you're retired, because when you're working regardless, you will run into some toxic people. You will occasionally have to do things for the government. You may get sued in a California court. California courts are notoriously not favorable to business people. They side with the employee every time, So I like being an entrepreneur because I don't work with, being retired, because of the things I do, which is mentoring. I teach core values. I teach great books of Western Civ at a local college. I do it free. I can do that. I've gotten together a bunch of people, fraternity brothers and their lady friends, and we worked with poor kids in southern Mexico, in LA, and on the Oregon coast. And then I put together one of the largest mentoring programs among these different universities here, because I realized all the adults like me over 50 knew a lot about business, but the kids in school at 18 don't know anything. I'm sure they would disagree with that. I said, "Well, I know something." Yeah.
Well, I think they know everything. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's right. I said, "Well, I know." I said, "You probably know how to order a beer and how to get to the bathroom. That's it." So when you're on your own, you're completely retired, you can do anything you want.
Mm.
And so there's no government involved in what I do. There's just no issues. It's all fun. And I can also, meditate and journal and take long walks and stuff like that.
Yeah, nice.
So I wrote the book just now, but it had to do with when I became an entrepreneur because of a very bad thing when I was working for a small company, and they asked me to lie on a court deposition. And I got panic attacks at night 2 or 3 times a week. I'd wake up after I went to sleep and going, I can't breathe. I had a high rise in San Francisco. I'd run to the window, open the window so I could get the air off the ocean. My wife thought I was dying, and I did too. And only after I saw a psychiatrist, for some reason I've lost my voice, and we haven't even talked more than 5 minutes. So I saw a psychiatrist and described this. He said, I know exactly what your problem is. You have ethics, they don't.
Mm.
You have integrity. And so bottom line is, he said, the only way I'm going to get rid of those panic attacks and get back on the beam is if I left this company, which paid me very well, and formed my own company or got another job. So that's what I did. And the book is about that.
So it seems to me that there's a bit more meat in that, because you realize that there was a massive discrepancy between your own values and the company that you were working with. But you did some kind of self-assessment, because it seems to me from what I've read, you met with the psychiatrist, the awareness was brought to the ethical dilemma. And sometimes it's a beautiful thing to have, to be able to recognize what we should be doing versus what we shouldn't be doing. And it sounds like it touched you quite deeply. But, a lot of people have the awareness that I'm not aligned with, what I feel. And most people don't necessarily use the word values. They'll say, look, it just doesn't feel right what I'm doing. So when you had this feeling, and when it was pointed out that there was an ethical conflict, was there some kind of a process that you took yourself through to go, all right, then, well, how do I resolve this?
Yeah. So we're not going to talk about the probably 39 years up to that, but till I was 39, I felt I was a loser. I did a lot of not terrible things, but bad things, and was in debt and got thrown out of places where I lived and everything. But I still earned good money during that time. And so up until I was 53, I was still doing fine with money, and was a little bit better guy than I was up to 39. And I'm working with this company, and 18 years after I started with them, they asked me to lie on a court deposition. I wasn't even involved with what they were lying about. I thought they were setting me up, and I wouldn't do that. During that same period, I started to do a lot of reading in self-help, especially a couple of books I have permanently over here. Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Everybody knows that. It's sold.
Brilliant book. I had the great pleasure of working for Stephen for about 2 years in the Australian office over here. And it was transformational, I have to say, being exposed to the 7 habits, what matters most, 4 roles of leadership. It was an incredible experience.
Well, you named another book. His partner, it might have even been his senior partner, I'm not sure, but that was Hiram Smith.
Yes.
And he wrote What Matters Most.
Powerful. What
Matters Most deals with what I'm primarily concerned with, is core values. Both of these men were unique among all the writers. First of all, this isn't being taught anywhere now. Among the writers that write about self-help, these two said, everyone has 10 to 20 core values. Now, they were both deeply spiritual, so they felt they were placed there by this guy. But definitely they were there when you were young, and they didn't change as far as they could see. And there's about 400 of them that I could identify. In my book, I put 122 that people would commonly work with. I skipped things like, instead of having integrity and honesty, I just put integrity. There are a lot of them that you'd be spending all day at the dictionary trying to understand the distinction between them. And I've now taught this for about 10 years. And what I found is that nobody knows their core values. In fact, there are few people in Australia or in the United States that they were asked this question, which you started to ask me. I said, who are you? Who are you? Most people, if they were asked that, would give the answer, well, this is my job. These are my kids. I like to play tennis. I do that. And I'd say, wait a minute. That isn't you at all. That's what you do. I ask who you are.
Mm.
Your values are who you are. Your deep values. So they would be things like integrity, spirituality, give back, family, learning, teaching. So I found 11 of these using primarily Smith's book, where he deals with that. And so I had them ready. I looked at all 160, knocked them down, and there are ways in which you can look at a value and find out if it's yours. There are little tests that are in my book. There's what I call the 15 little helpers. They're spot on in terms of telling you if you have a spiritual value or not. For example, on my list, there isn't creativity, but there may be on your list. If there is, you're not going to have much of a problem or less of a problem than me learning how to play the piano or paint or some other creative thing. And you'll have a drive to do that. You won't have to use much in the way of willpower because you'll love it. Well, it isn't on my list. So for me to play the piano or to paint or to do other creative things, of course, creativity could have to do with the way you set up your business, the way I set up mine. But that would take work on my part, and I'd have to use that undependable ally, willpower, that fades out every day. That's something people in this country don't know at all. If you've got your 10 to 20 core values, the next thing they said is make every decision and live on the basis of those core values. Eliminate all the other values and all the other things that have to do with the other values. So there's 390 values that I don't have. Well, 389 to be precise. That means there's a whole bunch of books, podcasts, people, businesses that I don't have anything to do with. I won't. Now, who has supported me in that belief? Steve Jobs and Warren Buffett. They both said, you've got to learn to say no. And Buffett said, among the most successful people that I know in business, they all say no to almost everything. Now, that's uplifting to me to hear that, because most Americans are all over the lot in what they look at. And they may have projects over here and there. They have no problem setting goals, but then they find when they try to carry them out that they fall by the wayside, whether it's writing a book or becoming a millionaire or running their own business, because they weren't set up in tune with their values. Now, let me tell you one thing real quick. Here's what a value is. I wanted to figure this out.
Just about to ask that question because I saw a description that you gave in an article that I read, and it was brilliant. So please go ahead.
I hated the fact that there was a coach that I don't even know, but she just read it. The reason is, if I'm writing a book, I'd like to have my own value, but I kept thinking about it and I couldn't improve on it. This woman is named Dawn Barkley. She's a personal coach. Deeply rooted fundamental beliefs, guides that dictate your behavior and actions, the foundations of what is driving your decisions, ingrained principles that help you declare who you are and what you stand for. And my 11 are as follows. Now, my process has, when you figure these out, when you get them down to 122 to 10 or 20, then you start defining them and you write a paragraph about them. I'm not going to read you that. I'm just going to read you the words. Where they're so vague you won't even understand, I'll give you a little clue. But this is in order of importance to me too, because there'll be a Saturday that'll come where I'll have a conflict between these two values. It helps to know which one I value most. There'll be activities or something happening at the exact same time. You'll be flying over here, and I know I can go down to San Francisco and meet you, and we can have lunch. And then I've got a good friend in the hospital, and the Super Bowl's on. What are my values? Well, I can tell you one thing, so I don't make you feel bad. I certainly wouldn't watch a Super Bowl rather than meet you. So, but it might be a problem with a friend in the hospital, and the only visiting hours conflicted with me getting. So here they are: spiritual, family, health. You might guess that those are values that a lot of people have, almost everybody, but they'll define them differently. Mm-hmm. My wife and I have no kids, so our life is going to be completely different. We've had a lot of time to travel, study, and so on that people with kids and grandkids don't have. I know a lot of people like that. They just don't have that time, nor the money for that matter, if they've got a lot of grandkids. Next is integrity. That was a key word, and why when I was faced with this dilemma. Value-based life, community. What I mean by that is give back, philanthropic. Freedom, and what I mean by that is financial freedom. And I already defined that. Accomplishment, learning and teaching, resoluteness, and renewal. Renewal means remaking yourself. That's also a cheat area. You know, if you like to watch film noir on Turner Classic Movies or something like that, it's okay. You know, you're not subject to criticism by people that say you sit in front of your TV all the time. If you want to walk, or you want to plant roses, or you want to watch film noir, or you want to learn squash, that's what I call a renewal. It's a broad subject that allows you to do anything that helps you remake yourself. The learning is interesting to me. We may not have time to deal with this, but I'll just give you something tantalizing that we can talk about. I think in this country, when people stop their education, they make a choice. They either want to be entertained the rest of their life primarily. They will want to learn, but I'm just saying primarily, or they want to learn the rest of their life. And it's my view, a very biased one, that about 80 to 90% of Americans choose entertainment. And so their vacations are entertaining vacations. They don't go to Europe for museums and art and take courses. They don't go in San Francisco. I took courses at Stanford and Berkeley. They don't do any of that. They want to be entertained. They're going to go to Hawaii and down to the Caribbean. And you can learn wherever you go, but it's not quite like learning in going to London or the Silk Road, or trying to figure out how Western civilization became dominant. I didn't say when, in case there's some people that are following the Chinese, because the Chinese are about ready to catch us. But the other people will learn. And the problem is, there's a guy named Ryan Holiday who's written a book about this called The Obstacle is the Key. You hit obstacles all your life. The only way you're going to succeed is to meet that obstacle and go around it. Now, how do you do that? Well, you do that by getting better, developing more talents and things. How do you do that? To my knowledge, only by learning. How do you learn? Well, primarily reading. But most people are not listening to that. In this country, the median number of books read is 5 a year. That means 50% of people are reading less than 5 books. The median time for an adult in this country watching TV or on social media is 7 hours a day. I mean, TV is 4.5, social media is 2.5. That's just pathetic. It's just, in my view, I don't talk like this in front of American audiences very much, but because a lot of them will be in that group. Yeah. And that's insulting to them.
But it does point out exactly what you're talking about, you know, the distinction of values, and what people value will determine their behaviors. You know, as I said when I started this conversation, I've got a huge interest in performance. You know, we play a lot in the fast growth space with business, but I also work a lot with professional athletes and even people in, you know, other areas, including the military. And one of the things that I've discovered is, you know, there's a lot of people that are looking for, and I hear this all the time, and I'm sure you do, like, Roy, you know, have you got a good book you can recommend on motivation? Have you got a great seminar you can recommend on motivation? And, you know, I often say to people, look, I don't need to read a book to be as motivated as what I am. And I certainly don't need to go to a seminar to be as motivated as I am. I'm just really clear on what my motives are, because without a motive, there is no action. Without a motive, there is no action. And so for me, one of the things, and this is where I'm interested to go with you, is the more clear I've become on my values and the more I play where my values are, I just seem to have, as do the people we work with, this untapped amount of motivation to be able to do what it is required to do in order to, you know, get to the other side. Why do you think so many people are so unconscious to this connection? Because, you know, I'm sure you've heard it before. How do I become motivated? And it says, well, get to know who you are. Why do you think so many people are so blind to this?
Well, both of these guys died, for starters, and this isn't being taught anywhere else. So we're going to talk about how to get to core values, because I'm like a doctor that doesn't want to give
Prescription.
tell you what I really feel because I should be checking your heart and everything. But I know by looking at you, you're highly motivated. And so I have a feeling that whatever number of values you have, you know a lot of them. Some people are more intuitive. Women, especially, know more of their values. Nobody knows all of them. But I suspect that you might have even had a few of the ones that I read down there. And if we went over the whole list, there'd be some that you already are in touch and in tune with. You don't have to know it. You don't have to say, here's my value, Roy. You're already in tune with that. If you're a man of high integrity, you don't have to have somebody tell you you're a man of high integrity. You live that way. And you would just tell me, oh, I never thought of it that way, Roy. It's a value I have within me, if Covey's right. These guys said they were in there. There's a recent book that came out in this country where a guy wrote, you can pick your own core values, like you go out and pick a peach off a tree. That is baloney. And I tried to prove it. I don't like to attack people anywhere. And I didn't attack him. I just referred to a book and the guy, I mean, he's going to pick it up, but pick up the attack, I guess. I said, this is so dead wrong. If you had no integrity, you couldn't pick integrity for a core value. If you were dishonest and a crook, you want to do anything to get up here and earn $1 million, you don't have any problem cheating people. There are a lot of people like that. You're not going to take integrity. As somebody said, well, couldn't that change them? No, the fact that they picked a value is not going to change who they are. If they're basically dishonest people. So
I think for a lot of people, a value is a social construct that they use to explain the things that they think people want to hear that are important to them, you know, because you hear people talk about, and this is what I've observed. I'm always cautious, and maybe you are too. Whenever someone says to me, I'm just so honest, I'm just so honest, I'm just so honest, I'm not interested in the descriptive word, I'm interested in the behavior, you know. But what I see a lot of people using are the words that make people, you know, either give them the acceptance or the recognition or the connection. But oftentimes there's a massive disparity between what people say they are and the behaviors that they produce. So does this kind of lead us to where you help people identify their values? It's like, don't think about what your values are, look at how you behave.
There is a pyramid that Covey and these guys worked out. Here's the pyramid. The bottom is see, let me get it up there. It's a funny looking pyramid. The bottom is your why. Why? And by the way, that should not be determined first. It should be done after your values, because after your values, you'll know more about yourself. You've done a lot of research. Then next comes values. Next comes goals. And last come tasks. In this country, all of the stuff that's written is about the top two. They don't write anything about your why. And that's not really true. A few people might. But they sure as hell don't write about values. They don't understand what they are. I've just said they're part of you. That's what these guys believe, and that's what I believed. And when you get into this, you're going to know. If you start analyzing yourself, you'll know whether learning is a value of yours. You know, if you read 30 to 50 books a year, learning is a value of yours, and that's how you become better in this stuff. I mean, I do stacked habits in the morning, 11 of them, one after another, because I read about that. I wasn't smart enough to figure that out. I learned about essentialism. I use core values to eliminate stuff out of my life. I don't have any toxic friends or relatives at all. That's what I use. I didn't have to be told that, and I didn't have to study essentialism, but there's a good book out called Essentialism. Beautiful. And when I read it, I said, that is fabulous. Then I wrote the guy, and now he's saying that when he does stuff, he didn't give me any credit for this, which is okay, but he says now he also considers when he makes a decision, not just financial bottom line and not good for his clients, but does it honor a value of mine? Here's what these guys said. You find your 10 to 20 core values. You make all decisions after that based upon this. Now, remember, this was at 93, right? I'd finished this right at the moment I had this bad situation. And Smith specifically in writing said, you will have two things, fulfillment and peace of mind. Now, if you want a good everyday definition of that, that's happiness. But I don't like the term happiness because it's a little elastic. You put a guy in a Barco lounger out near a television set with a Super Bowl on, a six-pack of Australian beer and he's going to say, I'm happy. Well, that isn't what I mean by that. He's momentarily ecstatic about being able to watch a Super Bowl. I'm talking about fulfillment and peace of mind. And most people would like to be fulfilled in peace of mind. And also, in my book, I add one other thing, financial independence. But I'm careful about that because you can't just do these things and get financial independence. You have to find the right vehicle. You have to develop some people skills. You have to have courage and probably some other skills depending upon the area you're in. Because financial independence, just the good Lord doesn't give you that. But you will get fulfillment and peace of mind. But just talking to you, they're the kind of skills you work with and you understand and you probably have. People that become entrepreneurs are understand that kind of thing.
I am curious from your perspective because in the time that I spent with Cubby, it was significant because I just had my my third business failure. I was almost pushed into bankruptcy, but I worked my way out of it, and I really learned an enormous amount. But one of the things I do remember is much like something you've referred to, they say that once your values are set, they're set forever and they don't change. But I guess you could say I've observed a shift in my values over the last, let's call it 46 years, or more so the last, let's call it 26 years, from when I was working with Cubby to now. From your perspective, do values shift or is it just the interpretation that changes?
No, now nobody knows this.
Yeah.
For sure. I don't think they change much. But if you were to say, well, what about Viktor Frankl? He's held in a concentration camp in Germany, or wherever the camp was. I think it was in Germany. He's there for years. That's a horrible experience. Couldn't that change a person? I'd have to say, yeah, I guess it would. Here's what I think happens when you say your values change. I think your behavior changed as to the values, not the values themselves. I think they were always there, but you may not have honored the integrity one, or the spiritual one, or the family one, or the give back. A person 18 has a different life than the person 48. The 48 would say, well, I have different values now. I have family, I have children, I go to church, I do this, I work with the relatives more. I don't want this to be a cop-out, but I believe that those values were probably always there. Now, let's say I'm wrong. The values change somewhat. Okay, they do. They change somewhat, maybe. But in my belief, I had high integrity before I knew high integrity. But that's why when in 1975, when a company, I got a big piece of business where I would get a huge commission every year without having to resell it. It was continuous. The company said, we're going to give you the commission the first year, but we're going to make it a company account after that. Because you won't have to do a thing. I felt like telling him, well, would you rather that I just had to work like hell each year to get to that? I'm giving you this huge piece of business. We don't have to spend any of our hours trying to get another huge piece of business. It's going to come in. I quit on the day they told me they were going to make it a house account. And then in 1993, when they asked me to sign this deposition, and I went to a psychiatrist after going to all-night sleep lab, trying to figure out why I'm having these attacks and seeing doctors and heart doctors and everybody. He says, stop. I know exactly what your problem is. You have integrity, they don't. Well, at the same time, I had worked on my core values, and I said, geez, here's a chance for a test. So I took, this is a sheet that has my core values written out on it. I took a sheet, wrote down the 11 core values here, my current job, and then over here, the to-be job, which was going to be an entrepreneurial job. Right across from number 1, which we know is spiritual. Well, probably neither one of them are going to. On a scale of 0 to 10, how would my current job honor my spiritual or my integrity or any of the other values? And how would it honor it if I was an entrepreneur? And I just have to guess at that. I wasn't an entrepreneur yet. And then I added up the numbers at the bottom. There's a lot wrong with that. Not every value should have an equal number. It depends upon who you are. Your spiritual may mean a lot more than family or the reverse. But anyway, this was like double that. There was no question I would quit. And a few months later, I knew the psychiatrist was right. It just sounded right. A few months later, the panic attacks left. So anyway, you go into my book, you look at these 122, you go down, circle the ones that resonate with you. Then I've got 15 tests. You can use any one of them that appeals to you, and you'll know the value. And I'll give you a test. In fact, there are two tests. One's a tough one, physically tough, so it probably appeals to you. I'm just guessing. You come to San Francisco, I take you up to where I used to have my office in a high rise. There's an I-beam going from that office. In fact, Smith wrote about this. It's in his book. I'm told him I was going to steal from him. He said, feel free. And he died 3 weeks later. I was fortuitous. I was able to see him. There's another high rise over there. And I'm going to say, and you've done your values. I'm going to say, which of those values would you cross this I-beam for? Which would you risk your life for? Now, so this isn't good for every core value.
Yeah.
But when I look down my list, I'm going to say, I'm going to cross it for spiritual.
Well, that immediately gives you a hierarchy, because you'd be like, well, not that one, not that one, not one, but that one. Yes.
It does.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody say that, but that's true. For family, yes. Integrity, I'd cross it. For community give back, would I? I mean, it's open. For accomplishment, for learning, would I do it? Yeah, probably for learning. I have one called resoluteness and renewal. I wouldn't want to give up renewal, even though it sounds funny, because that's how you refresh yourself. There's another one. You walk into a room, and in the room is all the people you're working with, your clients and your family. Well, let's say people still shouldn't even be alive, your grandparents and everybody. And in the middle of the room is a coffin. And you say, I know all these people. I don't see me anywhere. What's that? And I tell you, that's a coffin. And so you walk over and look in it and go, it's me. Then I would ask you, in a moment, you're going to hear eulogies from people that know you in business and personal and family. What do you want them to say about you? That is almost dead certain to represent core values that you have. And if you've ever been to a funeral, you'll hear them. They'll get up and say, this guy was a friend to everybody. He was always helpful. He was very warm. He went out and worked the soup kitchens at Christmas. Somebody else will say, smartest guy I ever knew. You brought him a problem, something that required rational thought. He was just a brilliant guy. He beat the hell out of me all the time in chess, too, something like that. And a third person would say, wonderful family man. He had a big family. He kept the family together. It seemed like he put his wife and his children first, even though he had an important position. That reflects core values. Well, there's lots of other ones. Those are two of my 15 little helpers.
I like that.
That help you. And when you're finished with that, you'll have them. You'll have them all. Now, will you be wrong? Maybe. Will you have missed one? Possibly. Will you have added one in there because your dad thought it sounded good, or because you're an Aussie, and Aussies have big egos, don't they? They're big, strong guys with egos. That's not true. I was just being funny. But
I can say yes. Paul's got a massive ego, so yeah. We're close to home. We're close to home.
I started it. The more I got into, the more I saw you weren't smiling. I said, I better drop this one. I'm making fun of his country.
It's like there's an American making fun of Australians when it comes to ego. That's bold. Yeah. So Americans are like that, But what'll happen is over time you'll find there's a new one that isn't being honored. That you just didn't think about. Especially if you do one of the things that I'm talking about. I talk about with you'll have a file manager and a task manager. Oh, I only have 11 files in my task manager called things. And in my file manager, which is called Evernote, I only have 11 folders. So everything I do in my life has to fit in one of those 11 folders, or I don't do it. I only discovered that about 4 years ago, because I had a lot of people took my classes and they got their core values. They were all happy about it. And they got lazy. Oh, ye of little faith. They didn't go forth and apply it to their life. So it helped them, and they were proud about it, but it was something like they bought 3 new dogs. Here, look at my dogs. Aren't they pretty? So what can they do? Well, they can eat a lot. I haven't taught them anything yet. So, and then you'll see something will come along, doesn't go in that folder, and you've always
worked on it, but not anymore. You've got to decide. Either it goes in there or not, or you add another core value to fit it in there because you didn't anticipate that. So there's where you get to essentialism.
Mm.
I have a lot of energy. I think you do. You may go way beyond the thing. There's probably lots of things you get excited about. And I see without values, you're like a dog in a meat factory.
Yeah.
You know, you're
Yeah.
everything looks good, and they do look good. You know, said your best friend's learning how to paint watercolors. He takes trips around the world and he paints the scenes. He says, and that sounds good to you. Yeah, well, sure, a lot of stuff sounds good, but you don't have 50,000 suits in your closet. They might all look good.
I've got a couple of crude helpers that I'd love to run by you. Like, people often say to me, "Well, how do I find my values?" And I said, "Well, look, finding your values is, really like going into Ben and Jerry's. You don't, if you eat the same flavor every single time, you're going to assume that that's your favorite flavor. But it's not until you get the opportunity to try a multitude of different flavors that you get to see how the different things taste." And then when it comes to the hierarchy of what's more important, I said, well, imagine you're in a leaky boat and the boat's going to sink. And if you don't get let's say you've got 10 values there. And if you don't get rid of one of those values, that boat's going to sink and you're going to die. Which one would you get rid of? And then the next one, which one would you get rid of? Which one would you get? It's very crude.
That's a good one.
Very crude.
That's a good one. That's a tough one because when I look down my list, let's say, where are we now? Let's just say it's a given I'm not going to get rid of renewal because you have to renew yourself. You have to, you got to find something, even though it doesn't sound exciting. Well, if you say, well, I'm going to take a trip to Australia and see my good friends over there that I just met, that sounds pretty good. So I want that to stay there. But I've already eliminated those, so it'd be very tough for me. But there is a hierarchy here. I mean, number 10 below renewal is resoluteness. That is not as important in my life as spiritual, family, accomplishment, learning, teaching, integrity, health. Just isn't. That's very tough to do the hierarchy. If somebody were to say, do you really have to do that? I said, no, you don't. It's just, it's a last step that helps you.
And I think because for me, it becomes apparent the older I get, with the more experience that I achieve. And I guess with moderation in levels of experience that produces wisdom, I start to become more clear of what that hierarchy is. But I do have a question for you because, I've got my own response to this, but I'm really curious on yours because there's not many people that I get to talk to about values and the depth in which they affect behaviors, because I'm absolutely obsessed, as I said, with performance. And the values piece for me is a massive one. But oftentimes I have people that will come to me and go, "Oh, Kerwin," and I'm sure you get the same, "Roy, look, I would love to be able to get out of this job and get into a job where I can actually express more of my values. But right now I'm in debt to my eyeballs. I've got, a wife and 2 kids at home. And, right now I have this job and it doesn't meet necessarily any of my really high values, but it does meet the value of survival, which is a basic need, not so much a value. How do I develop a level of motivation to do that job at the very least well, whilst I pursue, me exploring a profession or a career or an endeavor where I can actually express my values on the regular?"
Well, the first thing I'd want to know about, I'd want to work on, is their future, because that will motivate them in the current. If they don't have a bright future there, if you're swimming in an ocean and the waves are up here and you're about ready to drown and there's no boat around, that's not a motivator, because you can't swim forever. And that's where this guy is. So we've got to work on his core values and find out what his goals are, even though they're not current. I wish I had a photographic memory, because on one page of my book, it deals with this.
Right.
And I would have said, look at page 173, but I can't do that. I don't know whether it's page 17 or page 180.
Read the whole book, you'll guaranteed to find it.
Yeah. Here's what it says, because I was realize this. If you're in a family with kids that have special needs, if you're in a job you hate, if you've got a bad marriage, if you're into drugs or excessive sex, you're prostitutes, who knows what, you've got some bad habits, then you're not going to be able to use my book currently like somebody who's just hungry and has a vacuum inside themselves, let's say or not a vacuum, let's say a real desire to learn, and they don't have any of those bad habits. But in your case, my answer would be, not your case, but in the book's case, move toward the light as soon as possible.
Mm.
I know that you can only solve one problem at a time.
Mm.
Although Aussies think they can solve 10 problems. No, I'm just kidding. But we all think that. We all think that. We can work on 4 or 5. You really can't. You could probably, can you, if you were 50 pounds overweight, you could work on weight, and you could also become a mountain climber. Well,
but I think you're kind of poking at the importance of essentialism. And I think the reason so many people fail to solve their problems is because they try to tackle too many at once. Whereas if we focus on, okay, essentially based on my values, what's the number one problem? Okay, let's solve that one first. Then I think it makes life a little easier to be able to tackle those things.
And that's what you do. You'd say, and if I were coaching him, I wouldn't be telling him. I'd be asking him, okay, you got these issues. You're into drugs. You're debt. You've got a bad marriage. You're in debt. You got a job you hate. Which one of those is the one that's driving you crazy? Say all of them are. No. Which one is the most serious one? And at some point, they're going to get around to the job because maybe the money is so crappy that they can't get in a better environment. Or I mean, I painted a real bad picture. I mean, if you've got a bad marriage and a bad job and so on, you're down in a hole there. And so you just want to climb up a little bit. If we had the job, then we could start working on him if he had his values. See, they'd have to come into play there. And I would tell you, you were going to do your values later. You were first going to get out of this hole. I'm telling you, you won't get out of this hole unless you know your values first. You got to know who the hell you are. Or why don't we do a little test right now? Tell me who you are. He couldn't do it. He could say, guy with a miserable life. Well, that's really helpful.
It's empowering.
But that isn't you. So one at a time, you'd have to get out of that. Let's just take one of them. They've got a parent that's older that requires full-time care, and they don't have the resources yet to take care of them. Okay, that's a lot easier to solve than if you've got the worst of all 4 that we talked about. That person's probably fighting off depression. I don't know how they live. I've been in situations up till I was 39. I called myself a loser. So I was in situations where I was borrowing money from everybody. I was being done every night. I moved to San Francisco from Procter & Gamble, Cincinnati. First day on my new job with my boss, my car is repossessed. Well, we're over in Oakland visiting Clorox. He comes out and says, where's the car? And I'm an honest guy. I have integrity. And I can't tell him, make up something, because every day he's going to say, what happened to your car? So I just tell him it's been repossessed. And then in my book, it says, I wonder what this guy was thinking about his new hire. I mean, right then he had to think, Roy doesn't seem like that kind of guy. And he's, and then I was thrown out of a place I lived in San Francisco, in a real nice place. And I ended up being in a residential hotel, $100 a month for all food and board. You can imagine what that was like. Now, that was a long time ago, but you can still imagine. Yep. And when I moved in, a guy who lived up here on the 2nd or 3rd floor dove onto the sidewalk in front of me trying to kill himself. Wow. And there's black humor in a place like that. And so what they were saying, this sounds terrible, they said, he's so unsuccessful he couldn't even kill himself. Everybody kind of laughed. There's 2 kinds of people in there, though. There's young women, young men who are starting out, moving to San Francisco. They just can't afford something nice. Nothing wrong with them. And then there's people that are down and out or have a lot of bad habits like me, spending too much money. I also was not a drinker in college, but I drank Friday and Saturday nights when I was out dating or out dancing because I think I was too shy. I needed to get a little liquid courage to do that. But that wasn't so good either. I mean, I'd drive home drunk and I'd end up being in a bus barn at 55 miles an hour. That happened once. But somehow I'm off the freeway, I'm in a bus barn saying, good God, what's this? And or had a company car when I worked at Procter and was in Indianapolis and went out drinking Friday night. So I only did this Friday and Saturday nights, trying to make the picture look a little better. And
There's no
I come
judgment here, my
back Saturday. It's a losing deal. I come back Saturday. I can't find the car. I spent all weekend looking for the car. It's a company car, and I'm going to have to tell them Monday. I can't just not tell them. So, and my wife, who's out here, that I met in San Francisco when I was trying to change a little bit, she said, "Roy, you're late to everything, and just the way you behave. Do you know what that's a sign of?" And I said, "Well, it's not good." And she said, "It's a sign of you're a very selfish person. You think of only yourself first." I continually want to talk to my wife and said, "What the hell? Why did you hang around me with it, knowing what you knew?" And so I learned a lesson. So I was down in the tunnel in a way. I wasn't a drunk. I wasn't in alcohol, but I was a loser. If you're borrowing money from women you date who earn a fraction of your money, that's not a good sign. And you can't hold credit. I lost credit cards you haven't even heard of. Names that Ajax Plumbing credit card. I'll take it. It'll keep me going for another week.
The apex of this conversation is leading me to a statement that I read, and it's actually the subheadline: "Why Goals Are Falling Short and What You Can Do About It." I think it's fair to say that goal setting hasn't worked for a lot of people. Because oftentimes they look at goal setting like they're sitting on Santa's lap, and they're just going, "Okay, well, here's my wish list. Maybe write it on a piece of paper, and we'll just hope for the best." And so, what your essentially your thesis, your philosophy, your legacy is really about bringing people away from creating wish lists and more about understanding their own behavior. Is there any distinctions in that you can help for people who are having this land for the first time?
Well, a wish list means almost anybody you ever run into that has some exciting thing they've done, like they've climbed 10 mountains. I used to be a mountain climber. So, yeah, that sounds good. I'd like to go with you and climb some mountains. And here's a tennis player. Oh, yeah, that sounds good too. And here's somebody let me take you down to the soup kitchen, go down there and you start crying and it changes you. Geez, this is going to change my life. And then somebody else who's into books. And they say, I've got a great book here called Lifetime Reading Plan that has the greatest books ever written, 200. And I think they're pretty much agreed upon. There might be a few on the margins. They're tough books. I've read all those books, though, but they're tough. And there's where I did get hooked in. I said, I want to read every one of those books. Then I ended up teaching them at a local college. I don't know anything about books. So all we did is we would all read the book and then discuss it among themselves. Fortunately, everybody in the class, this is interesting, primarily women, about 80%. When you're talking about reading, you're talking about women. And most of the guys that I've known in my life, no matter what level of success they're in, are not doing what Warren Buffett does every day, something like 5 or 6 hours of reading during work hours. So you all of that stuff sounds exciting. We need to forget about that. Find your values first and only work on goals that are attached to that. My values make up 11 out of 400. That's about 4%, isn't it? Something like that. Now, values are not spread equally. I mean, activities and goals are not spread equally over all 400. But if they were, I could eliminate 97%, 97% of all the goals, the books to read, the places to go, and so on. But it may not be that high. Maybe it's only 80%. But that's a tremendous ability that you're given there. You eliminate 80% of the stuff that's out there. It's not essential. 80% of the people you'd like to read, of the places directions you'd like to go in business, the people you'd like to know, 80% of them you just, as Jobs says, say no to, because then you can focus on this. That's probably why when I was an entrepreneur, except for when I began, I only worked 40 hours a week. I only worked that much because there are a lot of things I like outside of work. I didn't work until midnight every night. I could have. I was excited about my business, but I knew my other values. So since I had the values made, it made me easy to leave this company in New York. Now, I'm going to make that a little tougher for you. I was earning lots of money. I had drivers everywhere I went, everywhere, even in the city where I lived. I flew first class and I dined in the best restaurants. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I knew that jobs like that were hard to come by. And my wife would come with me wherever we went. Now, there was the IRS doesn't like that, but you can pay for her flight. You can stay in the same hotel. You don't have to measure how much of the room she uses and cut out some percentage of the hotel price. So it's for people that are in tune with themselves, and I suspect you are just listening to this, there are already values that you're already honoring, just like I was honoring integrity. You may have 15 core values and be honoring 10 of them, but your definitions of them aren't clear, and you're still doing things that you've included somehow. And then there's 5 more values you didn't even know about. But this will cause you to zero in on what you care about. Now, the rest of the world will have to use willpower because the goals they've read about are not good for them. Some are, some aren't. And so after the goal sounds good, but once they get involved in the effort for it, they're going to have to use willpower. And that's why they quit. That's another reason they become quitters. They just can't do it. They can't do the tennis. They can't learn how to play chess, all those things. I don't know how to play chess, but before my values, I wanted to learn it. I wanted to learn to play the piano. I thought those would be wonderful things to do. Now, I'm probably not going to do that because, some of these are open-ended learning, for example. So somebody who knows their values like me, they don't have to motivate themselves very heavily with willpower. Now, I'm going to be careful there. You guys have a business. I had a business. Parts of business are unpleasant, no matter what, the taxes and stuff. So you just have to willpower you through that part of it. But the basic parts of it, your passion for it will come from the fact that you're honoring a value. In fact, in my book, I give advice to people, is it good to chase passion? Find something you're passionate about, you'll never work a day in your life. I disagree with that strongly. My book explains it. There's a lot of reasons for that. What you're passionate about, you may not be good at, you may not be able to earn money at. Just like a woman you date when you're 23, you're not interested in her, nor her in you at 30 or 35 or 40. You change. And I feel you don't know enough at that young age. I was taken to task on medium.com by somebody who just said I was an imbecile for suggesting people take dead-end jobs and forget their passion. And I never did that. There's a pretty wide spread between a dead-end job and a passionate job. They're jobs you kind of like in here. So what I meant, my advice to people is you get out there, get some work, keep your eyes open. And then later on, it's important that you be in something that has passion. And you'll find it later when you're more settled, you know who you are, and you haven't trapped yourself at 21. But she said she got a great job. She travels all over the world. I saw from her picture, she's still young. So what I wanted to tell her is, well, the game isn't over for you yet. You're still in the second inning. Why don't we have this talk back in the eighth? I'm in the eighth inning, the ninth inning. I'm three times older than you.
Come back in 20, 30 years, we'll have that same conversation. We'll see where you're at.
But on the other hand, I don't take on hardly anybody ever because they always have a point of view. And my point of view about her is she's damn lucky. Maybe she has better intuition than I did. I was a loser at her age. She's not a loser. It sounded really good to me. But just be aware. Steve Jobs says you can't connect the dots ahead in your life, but you can connect them when you look back.
That's so true. That's so true.
So anyway, do the best you can to get enough experience, and then go in the direction you want later. I'm not alone in thinking this. A lot of writers you've read about have written things about this. They've given commencement speeches about it. And I have a kind of a funny bias view. You can decide whether this is true or not.
Go ahead.
I actually, if you sell nails, and you make $1 million a year and you've got an international business, you'll be passionate about it. You may not think it's passionate, but if you've got a huge business and your family can do anything you want, and let's say somehow it fits in your core values, although making nails is not a core value, but
family might be, travel might
yeah,
be,
right,
and
and
that
you can,
facilitates the expression of those values at an incredibly high level.
And you like parts of what you like.
Yeah.
You like opening up in Argentina.
Yeah.
You like dealing with high-level people. You're not out selling nails or hammering them into a roof anymore.
Roy,
so
thank you so
anyway.
mate. I couldn't think of a better spot to end. We are limited for time, but I think you and I need to jump on another podcast at some point in the future. I do have an idea for you, though. I don't know if you've ever thinking about starting a podcast, but as we were discussing this, I thought there is a real space in the market for someone to start a podcast called the Values Podcast, where you bring on successful people and then you take them through a process to elicit what their values are, so that everybody can understand their own motivations. And I couldn't think of anyone better equipped or better experienced than you to do that, mate. So if you're looking for a podcast, mate, that's a cracking idea. Your book, A Fool's Errand, Why Goals Are Falling Short and What You Can Do About It. Where can people find this book and more about you, mate?
They can buy it. They can purchase it at Amazon and at Barnes and Noble, and that's it.
Fantastic.
If they want to read more about this stuff, they can go on Medium.com, which is a local blog, international blog site. Medium, Medium.com, and they can search for me and for core values, or there are lots of other Roy Cooks, I guess.
I discovered there are a lot of Roy Cooks.
So just take the title of the book and my name, and then go on there. And I've actually serialized the book. Every chapter except how to do it is in there, because my publisher said, "What are you, an idiot? You're going to give them all the way free? Keep one chapter out."
One chapter out.
So
look,
and I write a lot about this, just in responding to other people.
Wow, I think you need to bring out a podcast. I think that would be a great next step. Ladies and gentlemen, honor and a pleasure. Roy Cook, thank you so much for your time, mate.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for businesses. If you have ever wanted to grow your business faster than what you can right now, if you need to make more revenue, if you need more leads, if you need more clients, if you need to know how to plan your business in a strategic way in order to hit big goals, if you need to learn how to scale your business and grow your team and your business so that you have more freedom, then this program is for you. Imagine 3 days immersed with me, where we cover all aspects of business, but we do it from an immersive but also an execution standpoint. We execute every step of the way, and we're looking at 5 key areas. We're looking at your psychology, we're looking at your marketing, your sales, your leadership, and we're looking at your planning and how we integrate these 5 key areas to grow your business and your brand quickly. So if you'd like to find out more information, kerwinray.com.